Hey, I'm Chaz.
And I'm Dan. Welcome to Wine is Serious Business. We have no idea what number anything is anymore, but we're bringing you some more exclusive content from the heart of the Middle Mosel. I'm so excited that the three of us were able to get together to do this show. This is Daniel Immich. Perhaps you remember him from previous episodes that if I'm not lazy, I will link below. Watch all of those. But we're here in his cellar, in his Schatzkammer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your family winery does and what is a Schatzkammer?
So Schatzkammer is, let's start with the family first. So the family is making wine since 1425. The Weingut's name is Weingut Immich Anker. So we are located in the Mosel, Enkirch. And the family is like a family-run business. We have around about 3.3 hectares. A hectare is 10,000 square meters. And so it's a very traditional, very old family, and I'm 17th generation of winemakers now. Thank you. And as Dan correctly said, so we are in our cellar. It's our fermenting cellar here where we're sitting right now. So most of the wines are nearly finished fermenting. In the back, there's our Schatzkammer, or translated treasure chamber, right?
Yeah.
And so in this we store the very good, very special vintages. Very good vintages or vintages where something special happened, like my parents got married, or my brother and I were born. Besides a very good vintage, or where something very special happened, doesn't mean in the end that the vintage was very good. A very good example for this is like the vintages my brother and I were born. My brother was born in 1976, so 1976 you might know is a very popular, very good vintage for the Mosel. Lots of Auslese, Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese could be harvested. And just imagine my parents, first child and then a son, so and a very good vintage. So that's where my father normally drops in and say, and I'm gonna store now 1,000 bottles for my own private usage. So and then the year I was born, that was 1980. Was one of the worst vintages ever in the Mosel. So also in the Schatzkammer you'll find roughly 30 bottles of my vintage. So not that very much, but yeah, that's the way it is. The oldest bottles we have in there is from 1917, so time of the First World War.
Crazy.
lots of the vintages from the time of the Second World War and before are missing because that's where we have a very nice tower attached to our house, and that's where the Schatzkammer is, like where the tower starts. And the tower was used by the Germans as a machine gun nest during the Second World War. Then they left, the Americans came in, put their machine gun in there, and then they left and the French came, and obviously those young people far away from home, and what they do in a Weingut, right? They drink. And they drank lots of wine, so most vintages are missing, but some of them are left, and the oldest ones we have are turning now 100 years this year, and we have 20 bottles left of this, so we're gonna drink.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great piece of history behind us, which is really fantastic. We're going to taste the first wine and then talk a little bit more about the things that you make and what's in front of us.
Right on.
So.
Okay, so
what do we have here?
We have in here our Brut Nature Zero Dosage. We are also very popular when it comes to sparkling wine. My dad started making sparkling wine 30 years ago, and this is kind of an anniversary sparkling wine we are doing here, or as we in Germany say, Sekt. So it's Brut Nature Zero Dosage, has 2 grams of sugar and around about 5 grams of acidity per liter. It stays 3 years on the lease. It's 100% Riesling from 100% one vintage, one grape, one vineyard site. So that's Zepp Vineyard. The Zepp Vineyard, there you find lots of blue slate, The rootstocks are something in between 30 to 60 years old. Lots of slate in there, and that's very typical. So it's bottle fermentation, traditional bottle fermentation, hand riddled, hand disgorged, and for the normal
A lot of work.
for the normal Brut Sekt we use normally 2014 Auslese nowadays, but not obviously for the zero dosage. It comes without dosage.
Right, and that's as the dosage, not the base wine, right? The base wine is, right, yeah.
Yeah.
You get a lot of richness on the nose right away, like really good depth of fruit, and I think that points to, high quality of fruit and good ripeness that you were able to get in the year that you made this, and ripe apples primarily. I think some pears.
Stone fruit like peach, maybe a hint of pineapple. Smells like Riesling distinctly.
Yeah.
Has that aroma very strongly. Yeah.
A lot of those flavors carry through on the palate, but the weight stays light all the way across, which is really nice, right?
Not what you expect on the palate.
Yeah, it suggests the richness on the nose and still has these ripe flavors without it really any
Right.
weight.
Literally weightless on the palate.
Yeah. So I feel like this was kind of a leap to try and make a zero dosage after many years of history of doing the Brut. Do you feel like it came out kind of the way you expected, or is it pretty different from what you had in mind when you started?
Well, yeah, it did basically. So my dad wasn't that happy when I came up with the idea, because he thought, nobody will drink this because it's too special to say. Like the average sparkling wine drinker tends to do not like these because they are too dry in a way, right? There are 2 grams of sugar, so that's not very much to be fair. But I said, hey, let's give it a try. So maybe they like it. If they don't, we just drink everything by ourselves. So that's fine enough. And it turns out, so we have this now for a few months now, and people like it. People love it. Sometimes they say it's even better than the normal Brut, because they think it shows more the typical flavors of that particular vineyard and that particular vintage.
Yeah.
So that's also something we always use the one vintage for the sparkling wine. We don't blend it. We don't blend different vintages in order to show. So this 213 vintage was that special, and like 214 vintage might be completely different.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that you've got a real strength with the dry wines that you make, and I think this plays well to
Absolutely.
your farming, your fermentation style, and everything like
Right.
that. I think that this really takes advantage of that. Both of these wines were in the most recent garagiste offer.
Yes.
Right. So some
That's
of you may be brought here by searches related to that, or you've received your wine and are curious what to think about it. So just to confirm, these are those wines
True.
that came out earlier in 2017. Very excited to be having this early look at them.
Yeah, thank you very much for opening.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I did buy quite a few.
Yeah. So has your dad come around? Is he feeling good about the zero dosage going forward now? Or is he still, let's see what happens?
No, it's like now it's people giving their feedback saying, hey, it's very nice. So he says, yeah, maybe they were right. You were right. So that's something. That's a thing about which I like about this whole idea of doing the wine estate with your family is sometimes you argue about stuff, right? About facts, about new things, and someone has an opinion, and the other one has another opinion, and you just make a statement at one point, and most of the time he's like with like the same opinion I have, and sometimes he's not. So, but in this particular case, it turns out very well. So that's very nice.
And something I love about visiting these wineries in Germany, and I think really in Europe, and we're still a ways away from this in the United States, but this is how the family history is really woven into the production of the wines and the wines that you can taste. In Oregon, we're kind of beginning the transition to the second generation there, so we get to see some of these, father to child handoffs, which is interesting. But when you consider that every father has the experience of many generations before him all wrapped together, and I think that leads us well into wine number 2. Do you have any thoughts or comments about what brought your father to really focus on making Sekt?
Well, he liked the so during the time when before he started sparkling wines, it wasn't possible to get good sparkling wines from the Mosel. Most sparkling wines were made from companies. So, in his opinion, most of the sparkling wines they were making, they taste the same because
Sure.
they have the same method. They do everything the same.
Yes.
Either way, it's your wine or the wine from your neighbors.
Yeah.
And he liked the idea of the traditional bottle fermentation, like they do in champagne.
Ambitious, because that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and once 30 years ago, he came up with the idea, hey, let's do this for our wine estate. And his friend and him, they bought all the machines you need to have, and his friend, he had to know how to do it, and that's how they started. Only I think the first vintage was only very little, maybe, I don't know, 400, 500 bottles.
Sure,
something.
little test. Yeah.
And it turned out very well, and the people, our customers, were really positively about that and said, that's really great, that's the best thing we ever had. So, and now they start to continue, and nowadays it's like 20% of our total production is only sparkling wine. Yeah.
And I feel like a real part of the Immich Anker identity to the Immich image is that.
Immich.
Yeah, thanks, you come around with that.
Is your Sekt production.
Yes, totally.
Really that's part of what introduced us to you, right? Like our friends Barnaby and Olga, shout out to Teutonic Wine Company, introduced us. Here we have the Brut. Nobody except the Germans can use Auslese Riesling as their dosage, which is a great story in and of itself. Anything noteworthy between the selection between what went into the zero dosage and what went into the normal Brut, or?
Well, it's the same, I say Braunwein.
Yeah, okay. Oh, same still wine.
Same still wine.
Okay.
So, and the only difference is just the dosage.
Okay.
So everything is the same.
This is a geeky experiment what we're about to do, right?
It is totally.
Yeah.
So the only difference is the dosage, and the dosage we use 214 Auslese, and yeah.
All right.
Oh man, both these wines just smell so good.
And I would go ahead.
I was gonna say when I said earlier before, like it smells like definitively Riesling. Sometime with Sekt wines, I've noticed like there's a strong yeastiness component, and it can sometimes remind you of other things because the yeastiness is so strong, and maybe the terroir is not. Right. And in this, the terroir is very obvious, and it's
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's where my brain was going with it. What were you gonna say, Dan?
I was really expecting there to be more obvious sweetness, and that's the suggestion, the head, of course, and
Yeah,
the
the
thing
aroma,
all of
right?
you expect me to say as well. But I'm getting like a savory herbal element on this that I don't get on the zero dosage, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Perhaps coming a little bit from the Auslese, probably a little botrytis on the Auslese,
Yeah,
so maybe
a
I
little
can
bit.
trace that back to a source there.
Yeah, it's like a little more, almost like kiwi fruited or something, like a little like some sort of tartness on the nose. Anyway.
And that weight really shows more on the palate. That's where the sugar really comes through. And I feel like the length of those ripe fruit flavors, very ripe peaches, maybe a little bit of pineapple again, kind of sinking into the
I
sides
was
of the
also
palate.
think it's you find a little bit of quince in there. So that's
I can see it. It's not something I.
yeah. Quince is very
Understand.
German. So
Yeah, I've noticed that everywhere I go.
Yeah.
People really love it. Paul Cunningham also is a fan. So
Yes.
oh,
Wow. Well done.
here we go, Papa Hulk.
Yeah. Will we be on the show?
This is good. This is an introduction I was hoping to make. I'm so glad you wanted to sit with Papa.
So here we have our little Maya. She's 2 now, and the love of our life. She's very cute. She helps me a lot during helping me during the harvest or driving the forklift or the tractor. definitely something.
Yeah. Papa arbeitet? Yeah.
Make sure that bottles are,
Yeah,
Get out of the way. So perhaps the 18th generation.
maybe we see.
perhaps.
We'll see what she wants to do.
We don't force her, so if she wants to, that's fine with us.
That's a good piece of the story too.
Right.
You weren't
Exactly.
forced
No.
to do it either,
No,
right?
no.
Yeah.
So that's the basic thing. If you don't want to be a winemaker, then don't be, right? It's
Yeah.
just as easy as that. So, and if you are, just put everything you have, your whole, your whole blood, sweat, and tears into it.
There we go.
And
Herzblut, huh?
Herzblut, yes. Then you can make good wines. So,
Fantastic. Yeah, and it shows here, right, Maya? Good stuff. Viel Spaß.
Do you like grapes?
Trauben.
Bright lights.
Little
That's
words
fun.
today. Yeah.
That's okay, yeah,
Lady
we'll-
of little words.
Yeah, that's the way it works best for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to the wine. The sweetness definitely provides a little more body, a little more length. I like them both though. Like the fruit flavors are expressed very, very well. I think that there's like a little more like tart edge to this one, which I honestly kind of like. Yeah, but super delicious. Yeah. What's going on, man?
Mama?
Mama? Yeah.
How do you feel like? How do you feel about younger guests today who know very little about wine? What's their impression of Sekt compared to cheaper sparkling wines that they've had, or maybe even champagne that they try every once in a while? Are they pretty open to the idea?
Totally. Like you probably know that you can get for very little money. You can get sparkling wines in Germany. You can get a bottle of sparkling wine in a discount store. Like I don't know, is it allowed to say?
I don't know why.
You know,
Why bother?
Anyway,
we know what you're
so
talking
like
about.
the very
yeah.
cheap discount store for like I don't know €2, €2.50 a bottle, and that is like 50% of that is just tax. We have
Yeah.
the tax on sparkling wines here, and
Temporary tax, right?
yeah, temporarily for 114 years or so, and, since the First World War. And either way, so I mean, those sparkling wines are not well made, to be fair.
Yeah.
They're very easy, very cheap, mostly very Swedish, like medium dry, even sweeter.
Oh, probably sweeter. Yeah.
And people know these Sekts. They like it with mixing stuff with I don't know,
There you go.
Coca-Cola or whatever.
Yeah.
You want to put in there. And so especially when young people, when you pour them in a glass of our sparkling wine or Sekt, it's like there's like, wow, I've never tasted that before. So that's very interesting. So and this is what I like about being a very regional, very small productive producer. Is this is something we do. It's handmade. It's not like an industrial product which you
Right.
can buy millions of bottles. So it's only some bottles left. So
What is your production size for like the Sekt? Like what are you doing? What case size?
round about case. It's,
Bottles is fine.
Bottles, yeah.
5,000 bottles round about.
Yeah. If you love Riesling, if you love the story and the vineyards behind Riesling, do yourself a favor and get to know traditionally produced Sekt, because it's another way to experience a great grape, some great terroir, and some great stories.
Absolutely.
Speaking of
Well
great,
said.
yeah.
Well said.
Speaking of great stories, we're going to move on to wine number 3 here. Make Chaz do some more work while I
All
talk.
right. I'm into it.
This is a very special family block that Daniel's worked with.
Yes.
Your grandfather even, actually many generations would have identified this as its own separate special block, right?
Yes. So this particular vineyard is called Eisbruch. Eisbruch is part of the Sepp vineyard. It's located between Enkirch and Trabach, and it used to most of this vineyard used to belong to our family for several hundred years, and most parts we bought like from other winemakers who quit making wine, so we bought the rest of the complete vineyards.
You've expanded a little bit recently,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
which is great. Yeah.
And Eisbruch translates to ice break or ice fall. Would that be correct?
Sure.
In your imagination?
Yeah.
So, and the story for this is so where the name comes from is when the Mosel is completely frozen, which happens because of climate change only once in a while nowadays. The ice of the Mosel breaks at exact that point where the vineyard is. That's why the people said
Big
that's the
curve
ice
in the river, right?
Yeah, it makes a small curve there, and that's where the local people said, so that's the Eisbruch vineyard, so ice break vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my personal favorite wine, I would say, and also my personal favorite vineyard because the view is so awesome. You've been into this as well.
We did a
You too?
film
great.
show in it.
Yes.
There's
Sure.
Yeah, we filmed a
I'll
show
be
in
cutting. I'll be cutting photos in
Yeah.
throughout this moment.
And and we have this monorail garage in there where it says Riesling rocks. So this is like a statement to the people driving by, saying, "Hey, so this is very typical for the Mosel. Lots of slate in there. The wines." Well, we have very young wines planted last year, or even that year, and we also have very old wines in there. So the oldest wines in there are up to 120 years old.
I was so scared. So he said one of the things we were going to do when I was out is that we're going to tear out some of the Eisbruch, and I'm like, oh God, I don't want to tear out 100-year-old vines. I'm gonna feel sick the whole time we're doing it. Yeah. But they're still there, right?
Yeah,
so he's
they're
been
still
doing
there.
some replanting, but
Yes.
the historic vines are still intact, and that's. I don't know. That's a little bit of so that's probably planted by your grandfather, right?
Yes, great-grandfather.
Right.
Great-grandfather.
Nuts, right? That's so incredible. Yeah.
The parts of the vineyard we were taking out is a vineyard or parts of it we bought from a winemaker who stopped making wine, and the wines were planted in the late 60s, beginning 70s, and during that they used also crafted wines. Correct?
Grafted, yeah.
Grafted, yeah.
American
Grafted,
rootstocks, right?
American
Yeah,
rootstocks.
yeah, yeah.
So and
Phylloxera, yeah.
during that time, the rootstock or the wines weren't that good when it comes to quality wise. Good when it comes to quantity wise.
Yep.
But not very good in quality. We tear them out and replant them with more high quality wines in order to show up.
And I love this story because I think this is one of the key points really in the evolution of wine around the world is the transition from trying to get as much volume per acre or per piece of land as you can, and this is true with tomatoes and oranges and strawberries and really whatever you're producing, and the focus to try and accept a lower yield with the hope of getting a higher quality product. And I think wine is one of the few produce and agriculture markets in the world where it's pretty reasonable to reach for that, and that's something that you can accomplish. And so that philosophical change and that risk taking and that development is happening, literally today as we speak in the Eisbruch. You'll be able to taste that story going forward.
The thing is that the view changed during that time because in the late 60s and 70s they thought we have to compete with the bigger producers who can produce very, very cheap, and which is just not possible to produce here in the Mosel Valley because everything is so steep, lots of handwork. We use like hundreds of hours before we can harvest the grapes, and so we can compete when it comes to quantity. We can compete when it comes to price.
Yep.
Normally a Mosel wine has to be more expensive than like from any other region within Germany, because we can't use machines and so on and so forth. But we can compete definitely when it comes to quality, and this is where we have to put our focus on, which is, in my opinion, very important to put the focus on quality. So.
Smells good. I'm getting a lot of lemons, kind of suggesting acidity on the nose, and a little bit of like apricot underneath. A little riper fruits, but not as ripe as the Brut was suggesting.
Yes, no. Yeah, it was like more stone fruit and like apples. Like this is more like citrus or.
And stones themselves. Yeah,
possibly,
as
yeah.
well, yeah.
Like the minerality. Like an herbal. There's an herbal note to it. It's like reminding of like pine or something, but just a very faint. Wow.
Yeah.
So this is also not wild fermented, which is something I would normally do would normally do, but in 2016 it wasn't just possible.
Sure.
So
Normally, like 75% of the time, or?
yeah,
Okay,
right about.
okay.
So, but in that vintage, it wasn't working out. So
Right.
and but it's cold fermented, so which I have the possibility to do. It's the wines are normally filtered within after fermentation. Fermentation stops around about November, December, around about that. Then we filter the wines in I think 2016 vintage, late March, and the wine got bottled in beginning of June.
Lime citrus, I think, runs strong across the palate here, kind of as suggested by the nose. Drying fully late. I think those apricot flavors are coming through too, along with some really ripe apple flavors.
It was like Granny Smith to me.
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, ripe Granny Smith, but yeah, it's like, there's like, the apple's gonna come in late, like it's very strong citrus initially to me, and then like a sort of appley finish, but loads of acid there throughout the experience, as to be expected, right?
Yeah, good full acidity, good
Yeah.
full fruit flavors without the weight of sweetness, which I don't even mind. But like I mentioned before, I'm pretty fond of Daniel's dry style, and Eisbruch is oh, you make a couple different. You sometimes do a not just Trocken Eisbruch, right?
Oh no,
It's always
we
Trocken.
do I do Eisbruch normal Riesling dry.
Yeah.
And I also do like a second version to it,
Yeah.
Eisbruch sur Lie. So I leave the lees for nearly 12 months in the wine, stir it up 2 times per week in order to make it more flavory, and then it gets bottled right before the next harvest. So this
And
is
normally
the
that's
second
something I'd be incredibly skeptical of. No, sorry, I am incredibly skeptical of things like that, but I've had these wines from Daniel, and,
Right.
I like them. And it's definitely kind of an interesting experiment, because you don't know of anybody else doing that with their Riesling, right?
No,
Yeah, I haven't.
not
I
in
haven't
this
read
region
it.
so far, not with Riesling, and yeah, it's really rare. It's a style I like to do. So I make roundabout of the sur Lie wine. I make roundabout 400 bottles. So and the interesting thing about this is like it makes a completely different wine. So that's the most interesting part to do. So.
It's just really good depth of flavor here. It's really engaging. I probably cut this out, but like Chaz had some sips to try and think about it and was silent for probably a good 10 count at least. And as I'm having multiple sips, that's really holding true. And it's even more amazing considering that you said this has been open for 2 weeks.
Right.
And we're getting like the bottom this much of the bottle. I can't tasting it. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have believed that to be possible for a dry wine on top of it until now.
Agreed. Yeah, typically it's pretty normal to be able to leave like a sweet wine in the fridge open for a very long time and still have it very intact. If you come back, you forget about it for a month. You're like, oh crap. Like typically it's still okay. Dry wine's less so.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting experience. Seems to be doing well.
Is this typical for your dry wines? Did they hold up that well for that long, or just this
I would
one in
say that-
particular?
I wasn't just just testing you guys.
Okay.
So,
I'd be
but-
interested to try like an actual bottle next to it.
Well, what's changed? What's changed? Yeah.
What's changed?
From a fresh one.
Some of the flavors are already gone.
Okay.
So it's not that intense. It makes it more, say, sensitive.
Sure.
Right. Which is on the other hand very nice because it loses a bit of the taste of acidity wise, right? So.
Strength.
But
Or like it's-
yeah, just a little bit. It's not like it's a completely different wine. So, but either way, it's still nice. So I was very trying to taste this one. So that's very interesting for me as well. So normally I would say so if the wine stays if the bottle stays in the refrigerator for let's say I don't know 3-4 days, that shouldn't be an issue for the wine. So. But 2 weeks is already something, and even though it was just left in the bottle, right? So
Yeah, I'm amazed that there aren't more kind of distracting or like negative descriptors that come to mind. And I was, I'd be willing to give them pretty freely for a wine that's been open this long, and even looking for it.
Well, I wouldn't say there's anything negative.
Yeah, right, which is amazing, and I feel
I can see a dial down in intensity.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can see.
yeah, so because of the maceration time, the acidity is very integrated into the wine, which I like because the acidity is still there, but it's not like not that in front of your on your palate, right? It's,
Right.
Which can happen. Yeah,
Which can happen.
absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
can happen.
And I'd say that's one of the risks. When I find a Mosel wine that I don't like, that's probably one of the top few complaints, is that the acidity overrides everything else and you can't get around it.
And
Yeah.
people are afraid of
Completely agree.
acidity sometimes. They say, I don't like the Mosel style wines because they have so much acidity and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
And that's when customers sometimes complain, say, normally I don't like Mosel wines, but I like your wines. So this is what I hear or tend to hear from people, from customers from time to time. So because the acidity is much more balanced than sometimes from other
Yeah.
wines.
Yeah. You got anything?
No, that's
Okay,
it,
yeah. So essentially we're done. We're probably going to wrap up, but I'm going to ask a couple questions to hopefully get it in there. What do you see as real challenges for you going forward? Like, what is your mind most focused on looking into the next 5 years? Like, what are you really focused on? Improving, maintaining, changing, stretching into?
So I would say within the last 10 years, I did lots of changes, well, most of the changes are, I would say, done. So as I had in my mind, but you know how it is. You wake up in the morning and say, I'm gonna change something else.
Yeah.
I changed. Well, I started. You've been part of it. For example, some of the vineyards. So yeah, sure. So made them put new wines in, more quality, and this is like I would say something which is still continuing for the next, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years, and then we'll see what happens next. So you have to be like always like open-minded and say not like, yeah, now I'm done and that's it for the next 30 years. You have to be always like open-minded and say,
Constantly learning.
Maybe, yeah, constant learning. That's maybe something you have to change, and then you have to do it, right?